Welcome, sales associates, to Property Careers Prospector School, and we're moving through weekly. I will say that as this series starts to unfold, I'm now finding that there's probably more value, if you like, in just making sure that the subject matter has a direct correlation. Thankfully, this one does, to what's going on in the marketplace at the moment and how you can then utilize that to increase your productivity and, of course, your progress as a real estate sales associate. So today we're at session 7 and we're moving on. From last week, we spoke of the big 3, the first one being that of sales inquiry. And you would have heard me allude to the fact that, you know, with the big 3, the next installment, we'll talk about the regenerative prospector process. That how these 3 are intertwined, and if you utilize these correctly, you probably don't have to look at any other prospecting source whatsoever. Now, of course, each of these 3, sales inquiry being the first, is reliant upon incoming sales inquiry, and that means that you have to get listings. And of course, if you're looking and you're at the early stages of your career and you're trying to break into a market or rejuvenate a market, you do indeed need those seed listings. But here we're talking about, having gotten those seed listings, how you immediately leverage off them, turning 1 listing into 2, 2 into 4. So I cannot begin to tell you how important the open for inspection is. I cannot begin to tell you how its role, not just in generating prospects, but for the longevity of the real estate business is. If I go all the way back, and this is from the perspective of property sellers, of course, active property sellers, to when I first started in real estate, well, agencies were pretty much like a shop. And when somebody wanted to sell, they would just turn up at the front desk and ask for someone to come down and see them. And of course, what we would then do, we would then go down to the property and give them an estimate of what we felt the property might fetch, what its market value might be once it was taken to market. And of course, we were running our version, a very loose version back then, of what we call comparative value. Now, it was a valid inquiry when they came back, you know, I think the last of it was in the early 90s to the mid 90s, because you couldn't glean that information anywhere else other than from estate agents. Even we struggled to get good information around pricing, because it wasn't as though we would be sharing that information of what we just sold a property with a competitor, because we were trading on it. So largely speaking, you would know what you would know, and there was a significant lag in what properties sold for, even from the titles office and things coming back through. So by and large, we kind of guessed it, and we kind of made it up. And you'd say a number, and if the client size went down, you'd just up until you got there. Now, this might sound, well, what's this got to do with prospecting? It's got a lot to do with prospecting. You see, these days, that information that we used to share with property sellers is now readily available. They can get this information almost in real time from any number of data suppliers, what properties are selling for, what they're hitting the market for. And it falls to us in terms of advertising and generating incoming listing inquiry to figure out how to bring that or how to control that, and how to feed that information out into the marketplace so that you can identify sellers. And once you've identified them, you then want to, as best you can, represent your product for all that it has and make it work effectively in the marketplace. And so it was, they came in. Now, we fast forward to the 20 years, the other side of the new millennium, and property sellers, whether we like it or not, and these are our customers, are not coming into a real estate agency ahead of signing an agency agreement. They're not volunteering the fact that they are looking at moving. In fact, they don't want to come near an agent until they've done their own independent research around the value of their property in comparison to others. They want to arrive and an understanding of what their comparative value is, what they can anticipatively expect for the property before putting it on the market. And there's no better way for them to do this than to check out any available properties in the new market, in the immediate market, I should say, surrounding their property, and even easier to do this by way of open for inspection. Now, there's a couple of problems that occur with this, but this leads me to telling real estate agents that once you've got listings, leveraging is relatively simple in connecting with incumbent active property sellers, but you need to understand that you need to control the message. You don't need to find sellers once you have listings, because the reality is they're already watching you. Now, I'm fascinated when I look at and I talk about this definitely on the leadership level when I'm talking to the owners of real estate businesses. I'm fascinated that real estate agents continue, even to this day, you go into their offices and they invest a lot of money in making sure that the office is kind of state of the art. It's got all the nuances that you want to have around a real estate office, all the techno things and all the creature comforts. And they spend tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on fitting out these offices. Yet our customers, our clients, the property sellers, prior to signing an agency agreement, rarely come into an office at all. So this doesn't really hold any weight in their judgment as to whether or not they should choose you as an agent. And then I asked the question, how many of these sellers prior to signing an agency agreement attend open for inspections that are local to their property, whether it be through competitors or whether it be yours? And they say, well, almost all of them do. And I say, well, how much are we spending on improving and making sure that we have a superior open for inspection? And I've got to tell you, the result is startling, because most people, it's almost like a big aha. Something is seriously wrong. You see, I look at the open for inspection as the shop front of real estate. I take it one step further, and if you are taking notes, I implore you to write this down. I believe that if you utilize the open for inspection the right way, morph it into what we call an open home, a welcome home, make it welcoming, and a few other things that sit in and around that, you can literally turn that open for inspection into what I refer to as a virtual listing presentation. One of the key components, and I don't want to over confuse the issue here right now, but one of the key components to success in real estate is having what we call a USP, a unique selling proposition, something that you are offering property sellers that your competitor is struggling to compete against. Take it one step further in terms of it being unique. You want to create a USP, a unique selling proposition that cannot be imitated. Now, to be fair, most, if not all, of the facets that real estate agents offer are fairly one-dimensional. They're pretty much the same. You know, we list the property, we get some advertising out there and some clever marketing these days. These are some of the variable points that we try to compete on. But from the perception of the public, there doesn't seem to be a distinction. There doesn't seem to be a difference. Well, I believe if you look at the open for inspection the right way, you can create a contrasted product, and you can then move on, if you're clever enough, to have something that is entirely unique. So I go back all the way to when I started in real estate. Now, in the early days, we never had open for inspections. In fact, these were more of a novelty than the norm. So what we would do in and around property inspections, we would take buyers would come into the office, we would interview them on their needs and wants, we would then qualify them on their capacity to buy or sell real estate, put them in the car and take them out individually to properties. I actually believe this system worked a lot better than the one that exists now, for reasons I won't go into right now. But I'm not actually talking, this is prospector school, so I'm not talking about open for inspections in the capacity of buyers buying. having said that, I believe that the open for inspection, or what I refer to as the welcome home, needs to be geared so that it is centric to the continuity of prospect flow. So what am I saying? You should actually be more conscious of making sure that the open for inspection appeals to property sellers than worrying about buyers. I've yet to come across a buyer that's been concerned or otherwise about how well an open for inspection is run. They're just interested in whether or not they like the property. Now, you can make some obvious blunders. I mean, if you're not greeting people correctly, if you're not giving them good information, that could be a problem. But I still think that your paranoia needs to be centered around any incumbent, any active property seller that comes to that open for inspection. So there's a whole raft of things that we want to achieve around this. And the reason that I'm so much more paranoid about how they're perceived or how they're accepted by property sellers more so than buyers is this. You see, it doesn't matter. There's always another buyer. Even if you upset or put off a buyer around a property. Now, I don't want to do this deliberately, of course, but if it does happen, I can tell you there's always another buyer. There's more than one buyer for a property. We only need one. Yes, there's the best buyer, but the reality is if somebody doesn't buy it, someone else will. Yeah, simple as that. So whilst there's always another buyer, but when it comes to sellers, you rarely get a second chance with a seller. So when we're running the open for inspections, we want to make sure that active property sellers feel welcome to attend. They feel comfortable with volunteering the fact that they are there in the capacity of a seller running comparisons against their own property and not feel unwelcome. Hence the reason we call them a welcome home rather than an open home, because we want people to feel welcome inside the marketplace and coming to them. Now, there's a second factor that we want to do and be very conscious of in creating a contrasted product inside the marketplace with open homes. So when I first started years ago, and I used to do those open homes, I just found myself bored out of my mind around them, again, because they were fairly novel and not many people turned up to them. But you would have situations where nobody came, and we would run these things for about an hour. And, you know, there were many times when I found myself just there on my own and nobody turning up, particularly on a Sunday. So Sunday in Australia is not necessarily used to be a real estate day. That's changed a whole lot now, and you don't find it nearly to be the case the way that it was. And I always remember being sitting there and there was just nobody turned up, and I was dog tired, a young fellow. I was probably out partying or something the night before. I sat back in a chair and fell asleep. So I was watching television, nobody turned up. When I did eventually wake up, I looked down on my chest and there was one of my business cards on there. A buyer had turned up and they said, "Love the property, didn't want to disturb you. You look so peaceful. Give us a call." And they put their number on there to call them back. Very embarrassing. I'm not uncomfortable admitting that to you. But what I realized was if we were going to run open homes, they had to be productive. They had to have a direct correlation to making it work. And I realized suddenly, as the industry started to change, that sellers were attending these open for inspections. So I resolved to ensure that we had the absolute best open for inspection out there. And we started over the years, I'm not going to dwell on this, but first and foremost, we studied the competition. And I'm happy to say to you that in the last 20 years, not a lot has really changed around open for inspections. When you go to most of them, most agents just put an open board out the front. When you arrive, you're greeted. They might hand you a business card and a brochure if one's available. Then just kind of send you on your way, and the rest is kind of academic. Now, some have made a few changes, particularly in line with what I'm going to tell you. So one of the first things we do is we had a welcome mat there. That welcome mat then morphed into us having nice little banners up, and we started talking about other products that we had on board. Then we would have lots of props of other properties that we had for sale arranged. And we started to give out what we then initially called info packs, or we started out with what we called show bags, and we realized they were full of shit. And then when people would attend the open for inspection, we would offer them. We'd say, look, people that are buying, we've got one info pack, another one that is selling, and so on. But then I started to realize something that was way more important. Now, it's hard for you to do this on an individual basis, but I think it's imperative that you understand how it works inside of a collective. If you've actually got a company that you're working for, and it doesn't matter whether it's an LJ Hooker, or it doesn't matter whether it's a any other sort of franchise or other, you can still, as long as you can do it as an entire company, make a contrasted difference outside in the marketplace. And here's the important message that I have for you. You know, big business knows what people buy. And it's important that you get this in the terms of how it works inside of the prospecting equation. Let's look at a big business product. Let's look at, say, the McDonald's Big Mac. By far and away, the most successful burger in the world. But I have a question for you if you're actually thinking this one through with me. Is it the best burger? And the answer is obviously no. So how on earth is a burger that's inferior to many other burgers, how can it be so successful on such a grand scale? Well, think about this. What do you actually buy from McDonald's? If you were given the choice and you were in a new area and there were 3 burger shops, one that looked kind of okay, but you weren't too sure about it, another chain, and then there was a McDonald's, which one do you go to? Well, generally people go to the McDonald's because even though the product is a little inferior, they rationalize in their own minds, at least I know what I'm going to get. You see, the key to big business, the key to consistent prospect flow in the realm of the subject matter that we're talking about is reliability and consistency. So if people see the same product appearing each time, they then see reliability and consistency around that product, and they're happy to buy it. That's what McDonald's sell you. They sell you the Big Mac, which is the same burger produced as near as they possibly can to anyone that's been produced before it. So we buy that reliability and consistency. That then becomes the value proposition. This is the money that I'm paying. That's what I'm getting in return. Now, before you start saying to me, oh, no, that's not quite right, that doesn't make sense. Well, I'll ask you to run this analogy with me, and you can apply it. If you're not a drinker of Coca-Cola, that's okay. Apply it any way that you like. I want you to imagine that you're going into a service station and you've decided you want to buy a bottle of Coke. You may not have noticed this, but I'm going to draw your attention to this now. The Coca-Cola will always be in the Coke fridge. It'll be in a Coke fridge. The main product, the Coke Classic, will nearly always be at eye level. All of the bottles will have the labels facing out towards you. The reason that they're in a Coke fridge is that it has a non-adjustable thermostat that's provided by the company, because they know the optimum temperature that they want that beverage to be served at. So there's the Coke fridge. There's the Coke. The labels are facing out in front. Yep. And I want you to imagine you've gone into the service station, you go over to the Coke fridge, you're about to buy a Coke, and just out of the corner of your eye, at the last minute, you notice that one of the bottles has the slightest tear in the label. It's only a millimeter or two. Does your hand go anywhere near that bottle? The answer is, of course, no, because what we immediately think is there's a defect. There's something wrong with it. Suddenly, the value proposition doesn't work. Don't think I'm right? Well, ever been in a supermarket and you've gone to pick up a can of something and you pick the can up and it has a ding in it? Do you return that can straight to the shelf? Well, of course you do. So consumers buy reliability and consistency. Now, here's the fascinating thing inside the real estate proposition. The two things that our business is totally devoid of is reliability and consistency. If you can bring a product that appeals to people and then deliver that product reliably and consistently inside your marketplace. And there is no better opportunity afforded to you than to do this at a listing presentation, to do this at an open for inspection, to do this at a welcome home. Get this right. Well, then you're just on the way to creating consistent prospect flow. Because as I said to you, once you've got a listing, you don't have to find sellers. They're already watching you. And if you can bring them into the open for inspection and they see that reliability and consistency, especially if that product overrides that of your competitors, then they will readily choose you because you are a complete standout. Now, I did a lot of study around this, and I'm just going to give you the culmination of it. However, even if you're brand new, even if you have to go and talk to your principal about this or your sales team leader, even if you have to talk to the salesperson you're working with, I implore you to work on something around this premise. So I looked at reliability and consistency, and I thought, well, let's look at the human condition. Why don't we consider the 5 senses? See, hear, smell, touch, taste. If I could provide an experience that appeals to each of those senses and then deliver that consistently inside the product, being the welcome home, I reckon I'd be well and truly on my way. Now, I didn't do this overnight. I did this first and foremost, and this is the one thing I implore you to do, by studying my immediate competition first. So some of the things that we talked about in the early days that we added, they would be adding these things as well to copy us, trying to imitate us. And what we would do is just keep moving the ball, keep moving the goalposts as we went. And then I moved into this space when I thought about the 5 senses, and I thought, okay, well, what do they see? Well, visually, that's pretty easy. So we focused on little things that come in. So when you arrived at the open for inspection, we got rid of the welcome mat, turned it sideways, had it as a red carpet or whatever the predominant color of your company is, and rolled it out long ways. So we called this the red carpet, and it would just have the words welcome home and branded in a long fashion. As you got in, there were banners and there was lots of things that actually showed the products that we had on display, even to the point of actually having something that maybe sat on the kitchen bench that talked about the product that we had on offer, not least of which was a thing called the Property Seller's Research Guide, because we knew that if they could pick this information up, or we could have that on offer, even as a qualification point, as you walked into the open for inspection, we could say, if you're selling, we have a Property Seller's Research Guide. Well, the only person that reaches out for a Property Seller's Research Guide is an active property seller. Bang, instantly identified. Then we went on with the here thing. So we started to talk about this. How could this make a lot more sense? And we realized, I learned that when you go into a Woolworths or any other food chain store, they have different music that plays at different times of the day to suit different demographics. Then I further learned, I understood that the music was syncopated with your heartbeat and your age demographic, so that if you ran into a Woolworths, it would syncopate with your heart, slow you down, even if you were hurried, and cause you to shop at a certain pace. Now, I don't know if this is true, but I know that I had found myself running in to grab something quickly, slowing down and buying things I hadn't thought to buy before I went down for some reason that I did. So what did I learn from that? I then found out that at Freedom Furniture, they have different playlists suited to the demographic in their area that is conducive to people feeling quite comfortable there and buying that furniture. And because it's a lifestyle thing, I thought, well, that's got to work inside the real estate profession. And I just went out and took Shazam out there, got a 45 or an hour playlist, and started using those in the open home. We've changed that a little bit as we've gone on, but at least you get the idea, you understand the notion. So now I know that when people come into our open for inspection, so long as they're the same each time, they walk in, they hear, they see the same props, they see the way that it's set up, and they hear the same music, the same playlist. This creates consistency. Then we went for scent. Look at the scent. Yeah. And I tried to figure that one out. Well, I actually learned, in fact, it was a friend of mine who is into cinematography. And I was at his place of work just having a chat with him, and there was this big box there, and we're just talking about. I said, "What is that?" He said, "That's a scent machine." I said, "What?" It creates a scent so that when they put a set together, it smells a certain way. I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, that one actually is called Guggenheim." So what's that? He said, "Well, it creates a scent that's the same as the Guggenheim Museum. It takes about 10 hours to do it. We put it on the set. And if we're shooting something that's around the Guggenheim Museum, for argument's sake, the actors feel like they're in the place." Wow. And then I started to talk to him because this very same producer had just shot some stuff for a large franchise and their auctions. And he said, "Well, we used a different type of scent. I can't recollect which one it was, but he went on to tell me that that scent caused was supportive of the best result they'd ever had at a large scale auction for that particular group." So I rationalized if you could have the scent working. And lots of people have tried this in and around open homes. They've said, "Oh, get the coffee boiling," all that sort of stuff. And I just thought, what if we had a signature scent? So I went out, and depending again on the area that you're in, we got scented candles all the same. And we started to give them to owners, explaining this to them. We'd ask them to light these up an hour before you come in. So now I've got people, they come in, it looks the same, sounds the same, smells the same. And then we went for the touch and taste. Well, the touch was actually giving them, after identification, advice rather than price, and moving in with the property seller's research guide, appealing to the sellers. And I did experiment with the taste. We went down the path of doing, chocolates and all sorts of eclairs and things like that. I let go of it in the end because it's just too dangerous, especially with people having anaphylactic reactions to peanuts and all that sort of stuff. I'm still working on it, but I still think you can give them a taste of what's to come. The point is you understanding that an open for inspection is an opportunity to virtually list by showcasing your product. And if you're going to do it, you have to do it reliably and consistently. This will speak volumes because I understand you don't have to find sellers. They're already watching you. And if you're working in support, or you can give some credence to this, or you're asked to participate in an open for inspection, look for the reliability and consistency that you can bring to that environment, and you can create a contrasted difference in the marketplace. It doesn't matter if you're small and you're working directly with, a sales professional at the moment, you're working in the sales associate capacity. Together, you can design how you can set that up and create a contrasted difference in the marketplace. Again, this will bring people across to your business ahead of others. I hope that's made a lot of sense to you. Just a reminder, if you want an audio recording, to please send me an SMS at +61 410 592 165. Or you can email me, Mark with a K, at propertycareers.com.au. And I look forward to catching you on the next installment of Prospector School.